Okay, we'll get started, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. We're here to speak big data and talk about big data, and I'm going to go through the statement in just a moment. I'm Daniel Rowles. I'm here with my Chartered Institute of Marketing hat on today, just to go through and try and host the event. I've got some bad news to start with. This is supposed to be an interactive session, so you are supposed to be asking questions. So if you can be sitting there racking your brains with questions, that will make my job a whole lot easier. Otherwise, I'll have to come up with lots of questions on your behalf. Okay. What I'm going to do, just to give you some housekeeping, what we'll go through, I'm going to ask our panel to introduce themselves briefly. Just keep that to 1 minute so you know who they are and their perspective on things. I'm then going to go on and make the statement and give you a little bit of insight to that. And then I'm going to try and start by getting a perspective on what big data actually means. Okay? Then we're going to go through and we're going to ask a few questions. So we're going to start down here. If we can start with Ali. Just Dan, if you want to introduce yourselves and we'll just go along our panel.
Good afternoon. My name is Ali Moinuddin. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer of Workshare. Workshare is a company that provides collaboration services for marketers. What that means is we help individuals and organizations collaborate on documents and compare changes of documents, whether they're PDF, Excels or PowerPoints, in an online environment for your desktop or using a mobile phone. So we've been established for 13 years. 62% of the Fortune 1000 companies today use our platform for collaboration. And our focus is really helping marketers reduce the range of documents that they're receiving and comparing on a kind of physical level, and automating that process, helping them save time and drive efficiency of the document production process.
Perfect, thank you, Ali. Chaz?
Yeah, so hello everyone, I'm Chaz Felix. I'm the founder and chief operating officer of Bronto Software. Bronto Software is an 11-year-old cloud-based marketing platform for retailers to drive revenue through email, mobile, and social campaigns. We have about 1,000 customers, including the Armani Exchange, Samsonite Luggage, Direct Golf, and actually Muda and Pele, who's in the audience here. We've been around for 11 years, and happy to be here and talk about big data.
Thank you very much. And Neil?
Hi, I'm Neil Hamilton, Director of Personalisation Sales at Email Vision. I've joined the business as part of an acquisition, where previously I was a co-founder of a company called Predictive Intent that uses big data for many different things. And as part of the Email Vision proposition, the Predictive Intent acquisition really builds out a marketing automation platform, oddly with the name Email Vision, covering email, with also lots of very clever customer intelligence tools and social tools to, again, enable digital marketing and make use of this big data with about 3,500 customers across about 22 different countries. So an exciting company to work for, and hopefully we might be able to share some gems with you today.
Thank you very much. Okay, so what I want to do is make the statement, just give you a brief introduction to what on earth we're talking about, and then give the guys some space to talk about that, and then start taking some questions. So we're stating that big data will revolutionize digital marketing and will be the differentiating factor between success and failure for businesses. There are generally two trains of thought on this. One, that big data will be the savior of business and it's going to help you make lots and lots of money. The other is that this is yet another buzz term, and actually it's kind of taking us away from what we should be focused on. I think there's some space in the middle about smart use of data as well, but we'll open this up and start this discussion. There's been lots of talk about big data, bringing data together from lots of different sources over the last couple of days. Lots of the analytics providers, including Google, have been talking about that. And lots of the other email providers, people talking about kind of data acquisition and so on, have been getting really into this topic as well. So I just want to open it up and start by talking about what it actually means, and then we'll start to get some perspectives. So I think it might be good to start with Ali, because Ali, you've probably got a slightly different perspective on this to the other two, and I think that's quite interesting.
Yeah, so as I said earlier, we run a cloud platform that helps people collaborate. We have more than 35,000 visitors coming to that platform every day. So we collect a lot of data from the use of the platform itself, and what we do is we track what functions and what buttons people are pressing to really understand how individuals are interacting with that platform. That data is actually fed into a data warehouse on a daily basis, and what we try to do is kind of predict the path and the user experience of people going through the platform itself. We also try and identify where people are leaving the platform or where they're not completing a task, to really understand how best to promote new features of the platform. but more importantly, to understand how we can improve the user experience itself. So in terms of a marketeer, that's very, very important to me, because we need to try and promote or optimize the amount of time that people are spending on the platform. And in order to do that, you really need to understand the data sets that you're using as a marketeer. So we have a weekly meeting to understand what people are doing on our platform, and then we adjust our marketing programs in order to target customers who are either leaving the platform or who are very good users, to actually get case studies and to promote them.
I think there's two really key points there that we'll come back to, which is the understanding, so it's very much not just about the data, but also the prediction part of things as well, and we'll try and talk about that a bit more as well. So Chaz, could I get your kind of perspective on what big data means from what you do?
Yeah, sure. So I guess first thing is I both love and hate the term big data. I like the concept, but it is certainly overhyped and is certainly a buzzword, and I get a lot of flack from my team when I kind of bring it up. I think it's important to call out perspective, and so my perspective is we have an email service provider. So email and kind of intersection big data and email is kind of where I come from. We also focus on retail and commerce businesses, so that's kind of the intersection point. Email has a lot of data associated with it. I think to step back for a second, as the online kind of dynamic of our lives increases, then the amount of data that we can track and that is tracked increases. IBM called out that 90% of the world's data was created in the last 2 years. And while you can argue that it certainly is an interesting concept and is probably not that far off, I would say what we advise our customers to do is we're kind of traditionalists. There's data, information, action. So obviously, in a world where we're all online more, there's a lot more data, and so you are collecting that in various ways. Certainly on the email side. But what is the path to making that information through reporting and analytics, and then ultimately to action? And what are you trying to get out of big data? So that's kind of a big question. Is we all have big data, whether we like it or not. What are we going to do with it? What's our objective?
Absolutely. And I think one of the things we'll come back to is the idea of integration of data sources, which I'm going to pose some challenges about. So how do we bring all this stuff together? And also, actually, are we resourcing this properly at the moment? And have we got the people in place to actually analyse this data and tell us what it means? And are we working with partners to do that? So just to come on from your perspective, Neil, of what big data is as well.
Sure, yeah. Well, in the realms of the personalisation tools that we have at Email Vision, we're collecting web data, so every single interaction that's occurring on a website at any given time or a mobile app, and also the interactions from how people engage with email and social tools. So, as Chaz says, that's a huge amount of data, and really I think the tools that we're building and what we're trying to go to marketeers with are tools that enable marketeers to find the right data, which is key because there is simply too much of it. So we need to know what questions to ask and how do we get the right data, and then how do we act on it. So I think, as Chaz said again, it's an overused term. Everyone gets quite excited about big data, and there's IT guys, getting excited. But the reality is, what data? What do you want to do with it?
Right, okay, so let's kind of move into that a little bit. So I think it's a very good point there. I mean, quick show of hands, who's using something like Google Analytics at the moment? Okay, so most people in the room. Who's using some other form of analytics package other than Google Analytics? So maybe a handful of people. So pretty much most people in them have got some sort of web analytics, if nothing else, and we'll probably have some other sources. At this stage, you're never going to have the problem of not having enough data anymore. The problem is you're going to have reams and reams of reports, and it's working out which data is actually relevant, what do we do with it, and so on as well. And I'll come back to some points on that. But what I'd just like to get from the panel, and I'll open this up, is the idea of actually practically what can marketers be doing, and some practical tips in terms of how should we be thinking about this. So I'll open this up, whoever wants to kind of start with this. So just some practical insights into how we think people could be using big data and some first steps.
So from my perspective, I think one of the areas we're really moving out onto now is automating content which appears on web pages, within applications, etc. So we've got a huge amount of data, and we have decisioning tools that can decide what data, but the real key is doing all that in real time as well, because analysing big data, by the time you've had some tools to analyse your big data, your market's probably moved on. So you need to build an automation layer between your big data and your business if you're going to be successfully using it. Otherwise, it's just back to data mining as we've always done.
Absolutely. Any other practical tips?
Yeah, sure. Hello. So, sir, for those of you that are in the e-commerce or retail space, big data is leveraged for one primary reason: to drive revenue for your business. And it really comes down to a simple formula, which is relevancy of the message leads to call to action, which leads to more orders on your website. So the more that you can, have the right message at the right touch, through the right touch point, email, mobile, social, on the website, at the right time, the greater the call to action. So it's this drive to one-to-one marketing. No one debates that formula, and that leads to greater success, but implementing is the biggest challenge.
Okay.
For me, there's three really simple steps as far as big data or data is concerned. I actually think big data is a bit of a misnomer. We've all had access to various activities of data, and we've collected data in a marketer's position for years. Yes, today people can now interact with you in many different ways, so that's caused more data and to flow into the organization. For me, the three simple steps are building campaigns or building an activity, measuring that activity and measuring that on a very, very small increment or timeline, and then learning from the activities themselves, and then willing to take risks with activity, because if you're measuring them in a short timeline, you can adjust your activity to improve the results of that activity. So whether that's running an event, whether that's running a PPC campaign, or whether that's basically doing other forms of marketing, it's all about measuring and learning and then changing the activity in order to enhance efficiency.
And so real quick to add to that, testing is really a very practical thing. They say the madmen of the 60s are the math men of today, and math speaks to numbers and quantifiable results. And so the more that you test your campaigns, simple A/B split tests are a very practical way to leverage the big data, see what impact it has, and then to iterate and evolve that testing.
Okay, and just on that point, a quick show of hands. Who's doing any A/B testing, whether on their websites, on their emails, or anything like that at the moment? Okay, so maybe 10, 15 people out of everyone here. And that would be kind of one of the first steps along the path to doing these kind of things. In terms of some of the challenges of data collection, let's get this with Ali first of all, and we'll kind of work through. What are some of the challenges of actually collecting this data and some of the missteps people can take, do you think?
I guess all marketers have the same problem. It's the quality of the data itself, and how much data are individuals willing to supply a marketing organization. I think there's a lot of fatigue out there in the market today, where anywhere you go or any interaction you have, people are collecting data on you. So whether that you've authorized that or not. So the biggest challenge is to actually define the data set that will add most value to your campaigns or to your marketing organization itself. And for us at Workshare, it's all about the return on the investment. So every pound I spend, I have to return £5 in revenue or in pipeline. So I need to be very, very specific about what data is going to add value. So knowing where somebody is from, knowing what their kind of profile is as a user or a buyer, that's all great. But what I need to be able to do is to see what the propensity of them, or what their propensity to actually buy or upgrade will be, because that is going to impact my ability to ask for budget next year or improve the budget as I go through the quarters.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And any more kind of challenges in terms of data collection?
Not so much a challenge so much, because we encourage, we collect everything if possible, just send it all in, and then we'll assist, or then we'll show you what we've got that might be useful. But the key there is around the training mechanisms you use to share with your customers what data you have, and to teach them about what they could do with that data. Because I think there's a lot of companies just don't necessarily know the amazing data they can collect, and therefore they don't act upon it. So education is quite an important factor here as well of your staff. And
is just collecting more data always good?
Not always, but if you're, for example, Chaz and myself, we're working with the retail space, the more the better, because you never know what the retailers might want to use. So they might start to, say in a years from now, start doing some clever Twitter campaigns or something like this.
Sure.
If you've already got the data from that, you can leverage it then, rather than always cold starting. So the quicker you can come to a strategy to use your data or store it is pretty important.
Let's talk about privacy. Ali kind of alluded to this a moment ago as well. Let's do a quick show of hands to kind of demonstrate this. Everyone put your hand up if you've got a personal Facebook profile. Okay, so if you've got a Facebook page, keep your hand up for me if you are concerned about Facebook privacy at all. I reckon that's 90% of you. Okay, so increasingly we are worried about privacy. The reality of that on a day-to-day basis, if I try to collect an email address from you now as opposed to 2 years ago, you're less likely to give it to me now. So it's about this kind of value proposition kind of thing. So I think one of the questions to the panel is really how do we deal with consumers' concerns about privacy when we're looking at data collection, and how do we kind of manage that process, and some ideas on that. So just to open that up, anybody would like to go?
Sure. With some of the customers we're working with, they often say, we're using effectively personalization technologies that can easily get confused with behavioral targeting in one particular area. And obviously that's where we might use our MSN or LinkedIn, and adverts scarily follow us based on what we've done previously. So hence we have cookie laws and things like this to control some of this. But generally we're seeing that some of these customers want to reward their customers for the data. There's value in that data. So from a marketeer's point of view, if you could have a modal that pops up where you can collect an email address from a visitor, but you're going to give them a 50% voucher on their first purchase, it's a pretty neat way of getting the permission from the customer, and they get something back. So I think people are very aware of their data being shared all over the place now, and they're not, my view is, people don't mind sharing that if they're opting in for something and getting something back for it, rather than the old-fashioned sneaky way of just collecting it and spamming.
Okay.
To add to that, I think you need to separate the privacy and permissions. So privacy being more around tracking, and what is the willingness of the end consumer to be tracked, and how is that handled? Separate from that is permission, and I think Neil brings up a great point, which is you need to manage your permissions very efficiently and very effectively, so that you don't take someone that you spend a lot of money to acquire and put them off because you communicate through a different touch point than they expected. And those preferences that they have can change over time. And I think it's very important that you exchange value. There has to be some value to get them to commit to receiving marketing messages. And then you have to do the juggling on the back end in terms of are you allowing them to text message them? Are you allowing posts to Twitter and Facebook, email, that sort of thing?
Ali, anything in terms of privacy?
I mean, for me, I think privacy is a concern. We operate in a B2B space as a B2C. And even in the B2B space, what we're seeing is an increasing trend of individuals and organizations to unsubscribe to email and to other channels of communication. And for us, what we're doing is we're using the analytics to see which channel that our customers are using the most and are visiting. Are they using a handheld device, are they using a desktop, or are they using another form of communication to interact with us? And then we're making the messages hyper-relevant based on their interest, their profile. So that hyper-relevancy ensures that people are actually interacting with us, as opposed to us just spamming them in the hope of getting a 1% click-through rate or a 0.5% click-through. So based on the analytics and based on our findings on the analytics, we're adjusting the message to be more appropriate.
And just carrying on from that point in terms of the privacy side of things, talking about a kind of security slant on that. Yours is a cloud-based service. So how is kind of in the B2B world, how are people made to feel a bit more safe about that, and how comfortable do you think organizations are working in the kind of cloud environment?
I mean, today, we believe that the cloud is here to stay. I recently saw a report that 42% of businesses today are considering cloud-based collaboration platforms. Why are they doing that? It's because, we're all very, very busy individuals. We want to be able to get to our documents, and we want to be able to collaborate with our colleagues using any device at any time. Gone are the days where you just worked from the office on your desktop. You're doing it on your iPad, you're doing it on your iPhone. Once an individual starts to use a service, they want to be able to trust it. It has to be available. You shouldn't be selling their email to other individuals, and you should be making your communication relevant. And we don't have any issues with individuals, organizations having concerns about privacy or data security with our platform.
Okay, thank you. So I just want to open things up in terms of questions. Okay, so has anybody got any questions at this stage? Lots of people avoiding eye contact. Okay, we'll come back to questions in a moment. That's absolutely fine. Just moving on from this, I just want to think about the integration side of things. So in terms of bringing data in from lots of different sources. One of the big challenges that you'll face when you're looking at big data from this perspective is you've got data from your email, from your analytics, from lots of different places. Bringing that data together is actually one of the biggest challenges in reality. So I just want to get a perspective, and maybe we'll start with Neil as well. What are some kind of practical thoughts that we should have on this?
I think people considering a multi-channel data collection strategy, if you want to call it this, to get a single customer view, as another phrase that we hear, is really, first and foremost, can you identify the customer from the different touch points? So in email, it's obvious, there's an email address. Web experience, we have a cookie. But when you look at social, can you collect the identification method of how you identify someone on LinkedIn or Facebook? So once you've got your identifiers, you need to glue them together to make a single identifier. So then all the data joins together. So you can build profiles, if you like, of individuals and how they interact on email, how they interact with your website, and other channels. So its identification is the key to holding it all together. And
once you've made that identification, then how do you decide about the levels of trigger kind of communication? So you decide this person is exhibiting these behaviours. What do I actually go and do with that? And what's the process generally that people would work through to look at that?
Well, again, it's from my experience, it has been understanding the customer, talking to them about what are you trying to achieve in the retail space specifically, where obviously we're operating. It's about re-engagement with customers, getting them to come back, spend more, that kind of thing. So therefore, you're going to have to build almost consider a customer when they first join your business in whatever entity, however they arrive, they're on a journey, and at different points along that journey, you're going to be using that data. So trigger mails, for example, might be containing content that's relevant to the time they originally saw you, and it's pretty much unique to every customer. All the mechanics behind this are usually fairly straightforward, but it's what does the customer want to achieve? And I guess, Chaz, you probably see that as well.
Yeah, to add to that, in terms of automation, aka triggered messages, you see a lot of it with welcome series. So those of you that spend a lot of money getting visitors to your site, you at a minimum want to start a relationship with them, and whether it's through email or some other means. And you don't want that to just be one piece of data. You want to kind of walk them through, start a conversation, so you can script out at different points in time, continuing that conversation. So if you take an example of the apparel industry, to get their email address is valuable, but to know whether or not they're male or female or what they're interested in through a conversation that happens over a period of hours or days or weeks is extremely valuable, because that increases the relevancy of your message and ultimately, hopefully, you make a connection with them.
I mean, for us, obviously, the connection between the different data sets gained from a system like Marketo, Salesforce, from your website, from coming to an event like this is critical. We've termed this phrase, in our marketing organization, it's around the me economy, which is, we have to respect the customers. We have to basically really understand what motivates them, and they expect us to know, what channels they like to use, how they like to interact with us, and, use those to define our campaigns to those individuals. So, more and more consumers in the B2B environment, as well as the B2C environment, are actually putting up filters in terms of really trying to filter out all of the noise in terms of the people trying to communicate with them. And that's really based on their trust of the individual communicating.
Okay, so we're getting towards the end of our session, so I just want to give the panel an opportunity just to set some next steps of what we should really be thinking about. So just going to start with Neil, I'm afraid, Neil, and to say, what do you think, your top tips, what people should be thinking about, and just what to focus on? And we talked about user journey a lot here, and maybe good to kind of frame it within that.
Yeah, no, sure, absolutely. So your customers' user journeys, they're leaving trails of data behind that you should be collecting and harnessing somewhere. Again, I think stop thinking about the term big data, just think about right data, what's important to you, what are you trying to achieve as a business, and then do I have the data to create actions to engage customers in a trusted format. So keep it fairly simplistic.
Absolutely.
Really. Don't worry about this concept of big data.
Couldn't agree more. Okay, thank you, Chaz.
To add to what Neil just said, I think it is very important that you take data and you turn it into information and then action. And you do that for a reason, whatever it is appropriate to your business. So if you think about big data is an asset, well, the real asset is actually big information. And the more you can have your data be accessible and have a very clear path in terms of why you want the data and how you're going to turn it into information and ultimately action is the really critical thing.
Thank you. Ali?
Just again, build, measure, learn. Build your campaigns, measure them in a very, very short cycle time, learn from them, and then adjust your campaigns in order to optimize the return on the investment.
And I think that's a fantastic point to finish us up on today as well. So the panel will be around afterwards. I'm sure if you want to ask questions and talk to them about their businesses, they'll be more than happy to do that. Other than that, thank you for joining us today. If you wouldn't mind us thanking the panel for today as well. And thank you for joining us and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.